What would you do if the person who ignored you asked you to the most important event of the year? Alyssa Bennett was once the girl everyone mocked as Turtle Girl. But when Edgar Larder, her old classmate, invites her to their high school reunion, she agrees on one condition: she'll wear a mask. What happens next will leave you speechless. The sun was setting over the small coastal town of Seabrook, casting a golden glow over the harbor where fishing boats bobbed gently in the water. Edgar Larder stood on the deck of his research vessel, staring at his phone. The screen displayed a message from Theo Reynolds, his old high school classmate and the self-appointed organizer of their upcoming 10-year reunion. "You owe me one, Edgar. Remember that time I covered for you when you skipped class to go surfing? Come on, it's just one night. Besides, it's for a good cause." Edgar sighed, running a hand through his wind-tousled hair. He hadn't been back to Seabrook in years, not since he left to pursue his career as a marine biologist. The town held too many memories, some good, some he'd rather forget. But Theo had a way of making him feel guilty, even after all these years. "Fine," Edgar typed back, "but I'm not staying long. And don't expect me to make small talk with people I haven't seen in a decade." Theo's reply came almost instantly. "Great. Oh, and one more thing. I need you to ask Alyssa Bennett to be your date." Edgar froze. Alyssa Bennett. The name brought back a flood of memories. She had been the quiet girl in high school, the one who always sat at the back of the classroom, her nose buried in a book. She had been kind, but painfully shy, and the other kids had often teased her for her love of marine life, calling her Turtle Girl because of her passion for saving sea turtles. "Are you out of your mind, Theo?" Edgar typed, his fingers moving quickly. "I barely knew her back then. Why would she want to go with me?" "Because," Theo replied, "she's different now. She's a marine conservationist just like you, and she's done some incredible work, saved hundreds of sea turtles, even started her own nonprofit. But she's never come to any of the reunions. I think she's still carrying around some of that old pain. You could change that." Edgar frowned, staring out at the horizon. He remembered how he and the others had ignored Alyssa, too caught up in their own lives to notice her. He hadn't been cruel, but he hadn't been kind either. And now, Theo was asking him to make amends in the most public way possible. "I don't know, Theo," Edgar typed. "This feels weird." "Just ask her," Theo insisted. "Worst case, she says no. But if she says yes, you might actually have a good time. And who knows, maybe you'll even make a new friend." Edgar sighed again, knowing Theo wouldn't let this go. He opened his laptop and pulled up the alumni website, searching for Alyssa's contact information. Her profile picture showed a woman in her late 20s, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, her eyes hidden behind a pair of glasses. She was standing on a beach, holding a baby sea turtle in her hands. She looked confident, strong. Nothing like the girl he remembered from high school. He hesitated for a moment, then began typing. "Hi Alyssa. It's Edgar Larder from Seabrook High. I know this is out of the blue, but Theo Reynolds suggested I reach out to you about the upcoming reunion. I was wondering if you'd consider going as my date. I know high school wasn't the best time for either of us, but I think it could be a chance to show everyone how far we've come. Let me know what you think." He stared at the email for a long moment, then hit send before he could change his mind. Alyssa Bennett was knee-deep in the ocean, carefully releasing a rehabilitated sea turtle back into the wild when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She wiped her hands on her wetsuit and pulled it out, squinting at the screen. An email from Edgar Larder. Her heart skipped a beat. Edgar Larder, the boy who had once been the star of the surfing team, the one who had always seemed so untouchable, so far removed from her world. She hadn't thought about him in years, not since she left Seabrook to pursue her dreams of marine conservation. She opened the email, her eyes scanning the words. He wanted her to be his date to the reunion? The idea was absurd, laughable even. But something about his tone, the way he acknowledged their shared past, made her pause. She thought about the years she had spent avoiding Seabrook, avoiding the people who had made her feel so small. She thought about the work she had done, the lives she had saved, and how far she had come from the girl who had once been called Turtle Girl. and then an idea began to form. She typed a quick reply. Hi Edgar, I appreciate the invitation, but if I'm going to do this, it's on my terms. I'll go with you, but I'll be wearing a mask. No one sees my face until I'm ready. If that's too strange for you, I understand. Let me know. She hit send, then turned back to the ocean, where the sea turtle was already disappearing beneath the waves. Alyssa felt a flicker of excitement. This was her chance to finally face her past, on her own terms. The small studio was tucked away in a narrow alley in Seabrook, its windows fogged with the salty mist rolling in from the ocean. Alyssa Bennett stood in front of a workbench cluttered with half-finished masks, each one more intricate than the last. The air smelled of paint, metal, and the faint tang of the sea. Elena, the mask maker, was a woman in her 60s with silver hair tied back in a loose bun and hands that moved with the precision of someone who had spent decades perfecting her craft. So, Elena said, peering at Alyssa over her half-moon glasses, you want a mask for the reunion, not just any mask, but one that tells a story. Am I right? Alyssa nodded, her fingers brushing against a mask adorned with delicate coral patterns. Yes, I want something that protects me, something that lets me control how people see me. Elena studied her for a moment, then picked up a sketchpad and began to draw. A mask is more than just a piece of art, she said as her pencil moved across the paper. It's armor, it's a shield, but it's also a mirror. What do you want this mask to reflect? Alyssa thought for a moment, her gaze drifting to the ocean visible through the studio's window. Strength, she said finally. I want it to reflect the person I've become, not the girl they remember. Elena smiled, her eyes twinkling. Then we'll make it strong. But remember, armor can become a cage if you wear it too long. Are you ready to take it off when the time comes? Alyssa hesitated, then nodded. I think so. Meanwhile, Edgar sat in a small cafe overlooking the harbor, nervously tapping his fingers against the table. He had agreed to meet Alyssa for coffee to discuss the reunion, but now that the moment was here, he wasn't sure what to say. He had spent the morning reading about her work, her nonprofit, her research, the countless sea turtles she had saved. She was nothing like the girl he remembered from high school, and that both intimidated and inspired him. The door chimed, and Alyssa walked in, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her glasses slightly fogged from the sea air. She spotted him immediately and made her way over, sliding into the seat across from him. Hi, she said, her tone calm but guarded. Hi, Edgar replied, trying to sound casual. Thanks for meeting me. Alyssa nodded, her eyes scanning the menu. I don't have long. I have a turtle release scheduled in an hour. Okay, Edgar said, feeling suddenly out of his depth. So, about the reunion. Alyssa looked up, her gaze steady. Let's get one thing straight. I'm not doing this for you, or for Theo, or for anyone else. I'm doing this for me. I want to go to that reunion and show everyone that I'm not the girl they used to mock. But I'm not ready to do that without some protection. Edgar frowned. The mask. Yes, Alyssa said. It's not just about hiding my face. It's about controlling the narrative. For one night, I want to be seen for who I am now, not who I was then. Edgar leaned back in his chair, studying her. And who are you now? Alyssa met his gaze, her expression unreadable. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Back in Elena's studio, the mask was beginning to take shape. It was a masterpiece of silver filigree, with delicate coral patterns and tiny seashells embedded in the design. It was both beautiful and imposing, a reflection of the strength Alyssa had fought so hard to build. Elena held it up to the light, the metal catching the sun and throwing patterns across the walls. What do you think? She asked. Alyssa reached out, her fingers brushing against the cool metal. It's perfect, she whispered. Elena smiled. Remember, this mask is your armor, but it's also your mirror. When you wear it, you'll see yourself as you truly are. And so will everyone else. Alyssa nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. This mask would give her the courage to face her past, and it could help her find her future. The sun was setting over Seabrook's coastline, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Edgar stood outside a small, family-owned Italian restaurant tucked away in the quieter part of town. He had chosen it specifically because it was unlikely anyone from their high school would be there. Tonight was about practice, getting comfortable with each other before the reunion. But as he waited for Alyssa to arrive, he couldn't shake the nervous energy buzzing in his chest. When Alyssa finally appeared, she was dressed casually in a light sweater and jeans, her hair loose and slightly windswept from the ocean breeze. She looked different without her wetsuit or lab coat, softer, more approachable. But there was still a guardedness in her eyes, a reminder that this wasn't just a casual dinner. "Hey," she said, stopping in front of him. "Sorry I'm late. Had to check on a turtle before I left." "No problem," Edgar replied, forcing a smile. "I'm just glad you came." They stepped inside the restaurant, the warm aroma of garlic and fresh bread immediately enveloping them. The place was cozy, with dim lighting and a few scattered tables. A small fountain bubbled in the corner, adding to the relaxed atmosphere. As they settled into their seats, Edgar couldn't help but feel the weight of the past between them. He cleared his throat, trying to break the ice. "So, how's the turtle rehab going?" Alyssa's face lit up at the question, and she finally seemed to relax. "It's going well. We released 3 this week. It's always rewarding to see them swim back into the ocean, especially after everything they've been through." Edgar nodded, genuinely interested. "I read about your nonprofit. It's incredible what you've built. You've really made a difference." Alyssa looked down at her menu, her cheeks tinged with pink. "Thanks. It hasn't been easy, but it's worth it. What about you? How's the marine biology world treating you?" Edgar shrugged. "It's good. Busy. I've been working on a project tracking the migration patterns of humpback whales. It's fascinating, but it keeps me away from Seabrook more than I'd like." Alyssa glanced up at him, her expression thoughtful. "Why did you come back? For the reunion, I mean. You don't seem like the type to care about high school nostalgia." Edgar hesitated, then sighed. "Honestly, I didn't want to, but Theo guilted me into it. And then, when he asked me to invite you, I realized it might be a chance to make up for some of the things I didn't do back then." Alyssa's eyes narrowed slightly. "Like what?" "Like standing up for you," Edgar admitted, his voice quieter now. "I wasn't one of the ones who teased you, but I didn't stop it either. I just stayed out of it. And I regret that." Alyssa was silent for a moment, her fingers tracing the edge of her water glass. "We were kids," she said finally. "I don't blame you for what happened, but I appreciate you saying that." The tension between them eased slightly, and they spent the rest of the meal talking about their work, their lives, and their shared love for the ocean. By the time dessert arrived, a shared tiramisu, they were laughing over a story about Edgar getting chased by a particularly feisty seal during one of his research trips. After dinner, they walked along the beach, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore filling the silence between them. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the water. "So," Alyssa said, breaking the quiet, "do you think we're ready for the reunion?" Edgar chuckled. "I don't know. Are we supposed to have this figured out by now?" Alyssa smiled, a real, genuine smile that made her eyes crinkle at the corners. "I don't think anyone ever really has it figured out, but I think we're getting there." Edgar stopped walking, turning to face her. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you agreed to this. Not just for the reunion, but for tonight. It's been nice." Alyssa met his gaze, her expression softening. "It has been nice. And Edgar, thank you. For being honest. For trying." They stood there for a moment, the ocean breeze swirling around them, before Alyssa turned and continued walking down the beach. Edgar followed, a sense of hope growing in his chest. This practice run had been exactly what they both needed. The Seabrook High School reunion was being held at the Grand Ocean View Hotel, a luxurious venue perched on a cliff overlooking the sea. The ballroom was decked out in shimmering silver and blue, with centerpieces shaped like waves and seashells scattered across the tables. A live band played soft jazz in the corner, and the room buzzed with the chatter of former classmates catching up after a decade apart. Edgar stood near the entrance, adjusting his charcoal suit and glancing at his watch. He had offered to pick Alyssa up, but she had insisted on meeting him there. He wasn't sure if it was because she wanted to make a grand entrance or because she needed a moment to herself before facing the crowd. Either way, he was nervous. When Alyssa finally arrived, Edgar felt his breath catch in his throat. She was wearing a midnight blue gown that flowed like the ocean, its fabric catching the light with every step. But it was the mask that truly stole the show, a masterpiece of silver filigree and delicate coral patterns, with tiny seashells that sparkled like stars. It covered her face from forehead to cheekbones, leaving only her eyes visible. She looked ethereal, like a creature from the deep sea. "Wow," Edgar said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You look incredible." Alyssa smiled behind her mask, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Thanks. You don't look so bad yourself." They stood there for a moment, the weight of the evening settling over them. Then Alyssa took a deep breath and linked her arm through his. "Ready?" Edgar nodded, though his heart was pounding. "Ready." As they walked into the ballroom, heads turned. Whispers followed them like a wave, and Edgar could feel the curiosity radiating from the crowd. Who was the mysterious woman on Edgar Larder's arm? No one seemed to recognize Alyssa, and that was exactly how she wanted it. The evening passed in a blur of introductions and small talk. Edgar handled most of the conversations, smoothly deflecting questions about Alyssa's identity with practiced ease. "We met at a marine conservation conference," he would say, and Alyssa would nod, her voice calm and measured as she added a few details to keep the story believable. But as the night wore on, Alyssa began to relax. Behind her mask, she felt a sense of power she hadn't expected. She watched her former classmates, Pamela Williams, who had once started the Turtle Girl chants, Harry Griffin, who had asked her to prom as a joke, and realized how small they seemed now. They were just people, flawed and ordinary, no longer the larger-than-life figures she had built up in her mind. At one point, Pamela approached, her eyes narrowing as she studied Alyssa. "You seem so familiar," she said, her tone tinged with suspicion. "Have we met before?" Alyssa smiled behind her mask, her voice steady. "I don't think so. I'm not from around here." Pamela's gaze lingered for a moment longer before she shrugged and walked away. Alyssa felt a surge of triumph. She was now in control. As the band began to play a slow song, Edgar turned to Alyssa. "Dance with me." She hesitated, then nodded. They moved to the center of the dance floor, Edgar's hand resting lightly on her waist. The room seemed to fade away as they swayed to the music, the mask glinting in the soft light. "You're doing great," Edgar murmured. "Better than I expected." Alyssa laughed softly. "Thanks. I think the mask helps. It's like armor." Edgar studied her, his expression thoughtful. "You don't need armor, Alyssa. You're strong enough on your own." Alyssa's breath caught, and for a moment, she forgot about the mask, the reunion, the past. All she saw was Edgar, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite name. But the moment was shattered when Vanessa Mills, another former classmate, approached them. "Edgar Larder," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I didn't know you were bringing a date. Who's your friend?" Alyssa tensed, but Edgar stepped in smoothly. "This is Alyssa," he said, his tone casual. "We met at a conference." Vanessa's eyes narrowed as she studied Alyssa. "There's something about you, your voice, your eyes. Do I know you?" Alyssa's heart raced, but she kept her voice calm. "I don't think so. I'm not from Seabrook." Vanessa didn't look convinced, but before she could press further, Theo appeared, clapping Edgar on the back. "Hey, you two. Having fun?" Edgar nodded, though his eyes were still on Vanessa. "We are. Thanks for organizing this, Theo." Theo grinned, his gaze flicking to Alyssa. "Glad you could make it. Both of you." As Theo led Vanessa away, Alyssa let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That was close," she whispered. Edgar squeezed her hand. "You handled it perfectly, but are you sure you want to keep the mask on all night?" You don't have to hide. Alyssa. Not from them and not from me. Alyssa looked at him, her heart pounding. She wondered if he was right. Maybe she didn't need the mask after all. The ballroom was alive with music and laughter, but Alyssa felt the weight of the evening pressing down on her. The mask, once her armor, now felt heavy on her face. She had spent the night watching her former classmates, studying their faces, their mannerisms. They were just people, flawed, ordinary people. And yet, the thought of revealing herself still filled her with dread. Edgar stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her arm. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. Alyssa nodded, though her heart was racing. "I think so, but I'm not sure I'm ready for this." Edgar studied her, his expression softening. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But if you want to take off the mask, I'll be right here with you." Alyssa took a deep breath, her fingers brushing against the edge of the mask. She thought about everything she had been through. The years of being mocked, the hard work it had taken to build her career, the strength she had found in herself. She thought about Edgar, standing beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. "Okay," she said finally. "I'm ready." They made their way to the center of the room, where the band was taking a break. Edgar caught the attention of the lead singer and whispered something in his ear. The singer nodded, then stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying through the room, "we have a special announcement. If we could have your attention, please." The chatter in the room died down as people turned to look. Alyssa felt her heart pounding in her chest, but she kept her head high. Edgar squeezed her hand, a silent show of support. "Thank you," Edgar said, stepping forward. "I know this is a night for reconnecting with old friends, but it's also a night for new beginnings. And tonight, I'd like to introduce you to someone very special." He turned to Alyssa, his eyes filled with encouragement. Alyssa took a deep breath, then reached up and untied the ribbons holding the mask in place. The room seemed to hold its breath as she slowly removed it, revealing her face to the crowd. For a moment there was silence. Then, a gasp rippled through the room as people began to recognize her. "Alyssa Bennett?" someone whispered. "It's Turtle Girl," another voice said, louder this time. Alyssa felt a surge of panic, but Edgar's hand tightened around hers, grounding her. She looked out at the crowd, her eyes scanning the faces of her former classmates. Pamela Williams, Harry Griffin, Vanessa Mills. They all stared at her, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief. "Hi," Alyssa said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "It's been a while." The room erupted into murmurs, but Alyssa didn't back down. She stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "I know some of you remember me as the girl who loved sea turtles, the girl you called Turtle Girl. And I know some of you remember me as the girl you teased, the girl you ignored. But I'm not that girl anymore." She paused, her heart pounding, but her voice remained strong. "I'm a marine conservationist. I've saved hundreds of sea turtles, started my own nonprofit, and built a life I'm proud of. And tonight, I'm here to show you, and myself, that I'm not defined by the past. I'm defined by who I am now." The room was silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. It was Theo, standing at the edge of the crowd, his eyes filled with something that looked like pride. Others joined in, until the room was filled with applause. Alyssa felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away. She turned to Edgar, who was smiling at her, his eyes shining with admiration. "You did it," he said softly. Alyssa nodded, a smile breaking through. "We did it." As the night went on, people began to approach Alyssa, their expressions a mix of awe and regret. Pamela was the first, her face pale as she stepped forward. "Alyssa," she said, her voice trembling. I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry for the way I treated you back then. I was stupid and cruel, and I regret it every day." Alyssa looked at her, her heart softening. "Thank you for saying that, but I'm not here for apologies. I'm here to move forward." Pamela nodded, tears in her eyes. "You're amazing, Alyssa. Truly." One by one, others came forward, Harry, Vanessa, even people Alyssa barely remembered. They offered their apologies, their admiration, their respect. And with each conversation, Alyssa felt a little more of the past fall away. By the end of the night, Alyssa felt lighter than she had in years. She stood on the balcony overlooking the ocean, the cool night air brushing against her face. Edgar joined her, leaning against the railing. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Alyssa smiled, her eyes on the horizon. "Free," she said simply. Edgar nodded, his gaze following hers. "You were incredible tonight. I've always admired your strength, but seeing you up there, it was something else." Alyssa turned to him, her expression soft. "Thank you, Edgar, for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." Edgar reached out, his hand brushing against hers. "You don't need me, Alyssa. You never did. But I'm glad I could be here to see you shine." They stood there for a moment, the sound of the waves crashing against the cliffs below filling the silence. Alyssa felt truly at peace. The past was behind her, and the future was wide open. The morning after the reunion, Alyssa woke up early, the events of the previous night still fresh in her mind. She had done it. She had faced her past, removed her mask, and shown everyone who she truly was. But as she sat in her small apartment overlooking the ocean, she realized that the healing was just beginning. Her phone buzzed with a message from Edgar. "How are you feeling today?" Alyssa smiled, typing back. "Lighter, freer. How about you?" "Proud," Edgar replied, "and inspired. You've got a lot of people talking, Alyssa, in a good way." Alyssa set her phone down, her thoughts drifting to the future. She had spent so long running from her past, but now she felt ready to embrace what came next. A few days later, Alyssa was back at the Turtle Rehabilitation Center, her sanctuary and her passion. She was in the middle of checking on a young loggerhead turtle when Edgar appeared at the door. "Hey," he said, leaning against the frame. "Got a minute?" Alyssa nodded, setting down her clipboard. "Of course. What's up?" Edgar stepped inside, his hands in his pockets. "I've been thinking about what you said at the reunion, about moving forward, and I realized I want to be part of that, not just as your date to a ball, but as someone who supports you. Your work, your mission, it's incredible, Alyssa, and I want to help." Alyssa raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Help how?" Edgar smiled. "I've been talking to some colleagues about your nonprofit. We'd like to fund a new project, a research initiative focused on the impact of climate change on sea turtle populations. If you're interested, of course." Alyssa felt a surge of excitement. That would be amazing. "But Edgar, you don't have to do this." "I know," he said, "but I want to. You've inspired me, Alyssa, and I think we could do some real good together." Alyssa smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, Edgar. That means a lot." Over the next few weeks, Alyssa and Edgar worked closely together, planning the new research initiative. They spent long hours at the center, discussing ideas, reviewing data, and brainstorming ways to make a bigger impact. As they worked, Alyssa found herself opening up to Edgar in ways she hadn't expected. She told him about her struggles in high school, her fears of failure, and her dreams for the future. And Edgar, in turn, shared his own vulnerabilities, his regrets about the past, his hopes for redemption. One evening, as they sat on the beach watching the sunset, Edgar turned to Alyssa. "You know, I used to think I had everything figured out, but meeting you, it's made me realize how much I still have to learn." Alyssa smiled, her eyes on the horizon. "I think we're all still learning, Edgar. The important thing is that we're trying." Edgar nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You're right, and I'm glad I'm trying with you." As the weeks turned into months, Alyssa's nonprofit grew, thanks in large part to Edgar's support. They launched the research initiative, which quickly gained attention from the scientific community. Alyssa found herself speaking at conferences, collaborating with experts, and making a difference on a larger scale than she had ever imagined. But the biggest change was in Alyssa herself. She no longer felt the need to hide behind a mask literal or metaphorical. She had faced her past, embraced her present, and was building a future she was proud of. One evening, as they stood on the beach watching a group of sea turtles return to the ocean, Edgar turned to Alyssa. "You know, I've been thinking we should make this official." Alyssa raised an eyebrow, a smile playing on her lips. "Official how?" Edgar took her hand, his expression serious. "I'm not just talking about the research initiative, Alyssa. I'm talking about us. I know we started this as a way to face the past, but I think we could have a future together. If you want that." Alyssa felt her heart skip a beat. She looked at Edgar, at the man who had stood by her side through everything, and realized how much he meant to her. "I do," she said softly. "I really do." Edgar smiled, pulling her into a hug. "Good, because I'm not going anywhere." As they stood there, the waves crashing against the shore and the stars beginning to twinkle above, Alyssa felt a sense of peace she hadn't known was possible. The past was behind her, the future was bright, and she was finally free to be herself. This story reminds us that true transformation comes from within, and that sometimes, the people who once hurt us can become our greatest allies. What would you do if faced with your past? Would you wear a mask or face it head-on? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Embrace the Journey for more tales of redemption and transformation.